Welcome to Faith for the Journey. This is episode number 7, and I'm just so excited to be with you on part 2 of When Life Hurts. And I'd like to open up with this because I'm so excited. Yay! It's a big deal, guys. Episode number 7. Woohoo! I'm giving myself a round of applause. And I'm giving also all of you a round of applause for staying with me for episode number 7, When Life Hurts, part 2. Welcome. Can you feel it? I can feel that. Ow! It's way cool. Even Shadow's looking at me. He's like, yeah, that's cool. Pretty soon when I start doing videos, you can recording, you can see Shadow, how he hangs around for all of these episodes. Let's give Shadow a round of applause. Yay, Shadow! That is so cool. We're going to rock out with music as always to kind of start and just to kind of set the tone for our time together. And you know, I love Samuel Midas. We're going to start with Samuel Midas. This is a new one that I stumbled upon because I'm always listening for new music. I love to worship. So rock out with You Got Me. Well, let me try to start it first of all. I thought I did. Ha. And if I just make a quick confession, I was struggling to come on today. I was like, part 2? Am I going to do this? Is it going to happen? And then I remember that, you know what? Well, I'll tell you more about that later. I don't have to commend myself. I don't have to approve myself. It's who approves? G-O-D. So that's who approves. All right, so let's rock out with Samuel Midas, and the title is You Got Me. Here we go. I'm trying to get it going, guys. I don't know what's going on. Hang on, guys. You know, it's so funny. I got some feedback the last time from the last podcast. I was told that that the music is low and that persons are not able to hear it, and I'm not sure why that is. At any rate, I was told that it's low, really low, and really not, audible. So I'm going to work on that, and please keep the feedback coming. It's really amazing. I keep learning. I'm still a new podcaster, so I'm hearing this tweaking or squeaking sound. So I'm going to need to turn my volume down a little bit more too. That's a lot better. It's not squeaking so much. Okay, great. So here we go with Samuel Midas, as promised. You got me. Yes, he got us. He got us. Woohoo! I love this song. When I first heard this song, oh my, I felt like goose pimples. I was like, wow, you can just feel Samuel Midas in this song. And, I looked him up when I started podcasting, Healing of the Heart. I fell in love because I stumbled upon his music and I was just like, wow. And, he is in Samuel Midas. I think he's a millennial. He's in his 30s. So I'm 10 years older than Samuel Midas. And his words of encouragement, he was like, you got to keep going in your life. Because you never know the other lives that you're touching. You just don't know the uniqueness that you continue to learn about yourself. And so that's why you cannot give up on your story. And so I figured I would definitely open up, episode 7, When Life Hurts, part 2, with this powerful song. Listen to a young man that had his own struggles in life. Who doesn't have struggles? Hey, we're born into it. We're born into it. And so we're going to pick up on where we left off from the last podcast. But I always like to introduce myself because I know that, there are persons that are new listening to Faith for the Journey. And I always just give a quick introduction. I'm Keisha Henry, licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, wife, mom, and, I don't know, all kinds of things. But more importantly, a woman who loves God for sure. And a woman who has been redeemed by God. And, he continues to redeem me every single day. And I'm so grateful for that. And so, yeah, that's who I am. And this is the sister podcast to Healing of the Heart. Healing of the Heart is based on my first book, Healing of the Heart. And from time to time in this podcast, I reference some of the materials from it, some of the poetry or the stories from it, because it goes hand in hand. And I'm excited to do Faith for the Journey. And, speaking about excitement, it's not always like that, because I was coming on today. Well, all this week, I kind of struggled feeling like, hey, you know what? when things first start out, it feels so great, right? But then as the journey, continues, sometimes you feel worn. Sometimes you feel like, man, I don't see the growth, or it just doesn't feel good today. Here's the thing about life. Life is not always going to feel good. you know, if you live long enough, you know that it doesn't. And so it's not about the feeling all the time. It's about the commitment. And so I want you to know that I'm committed to faith for the journey. Are you? Are you committed to yourself? Remember, faith for the journey is one of the elements. If you've been listening to any of the episode at all, I've been really weaving in there, talking about the former rain and the latter rain. So I'm hoping that, I don't know, that faith for the journey will be the former rain that will beginning to help to break up, the hardness in your life, the hardness around your heart or your belief, and that you can evolve spiritually, because it really requires you to evolve. In other words, if you're like a baby when you're born and you're still a baby at 27, then you're not, you're still, if you're still a baby crawling on the ground as an adult, then you have not evolved. You have not grown. And oftentimes it's interesting that just flew out of my mouth, because a lot of times in our lives, we have not evolved spiritually. And so we don't have the currency to meet the difficulties that comes to all of us when life hurts, So yeah, this is who I am. This is why I do the podcast, is to help individuals to evolve spiritually, right? Because that's the primary currency that is needed, to meet life's challenges and changes that they are inevitable. And we are not exempt from, none of us are exempt from those things, not one person. So I'm hoping that faith for the journey, that I am a person that is helping to co-author. You often hear me use this word co-authoring, that I am one of those positive persons in your life. I'm one of those positive persons. You probably sat on the couch talking to me for a session, whether individual or family or groups. And I'm hoping that, I'm one of those persons that have helped you to evolve spiritually, to grow, so you can meet life's challenges, because they come and they will continue to come. So again, welcome to Faith for the Journey. And I always take a pause here now and say, hey, you know what? This podcast is about keeping everyone safe and making sure that safety is our number one priority for every podcast. You will hear me say this all the time, right? So if this podcast gets really tough for you, I want you to stop it, please. I want you to step outside, call a friend, or just shut it down. If you're listening to this podcast and anything, touches your heart and you have questions, you can always reach me, right? So you can reach me on social media, nbhi-llc.org is our website, or you can reach me at NBHI or Begin Today on Facebook. You can find me. And my email is k.henry@nbhi-llc.net. So there are different ways to find me if you have any questions. And if you're feeling unsafe with yourself, like seriously, and I always slow down here, even when I'm working, I say, hey, when I begin the conversation, when I'm doing consenting, hey, I want you to know that everything we talk about is confidential. So on this podcast, it's not confidential because it's obviously public. But as I'm talking to you, right? If you feel like you're unsafe with yourself and you're feeling like, hey, you know what? I'm having thoughts of hurting myself. I want you to know there's no judgment about that, because life can really take us there. It can, And the brain tells us that everything is hopeless, and everything around us says that. That's because the brain doesn't have all the facts, and it's trying to complete a story that doesn't have all the details to. So then we want to end everything new. So if you feel like that, I want you to pick up the phone and dial 988 and hit 1. That's that's not only like the abuse line, but also for someone who's feeling, or feel like they're in crisis, or that they're being abused by someone and they're being harmed, you can call that number. All right. Or go to your local ER. You can just get up and go there, no judgment. I'm so happy that, I don't know, suicide is becoming more of, a table conversation wherein people can begin to really talk about that and not feel judged and not feel like they can't share. I mean, I can go on and tell you about scores of persons that I've talked to, and they say, hey, you know what? I've never really said that to anyone. Mm-hmm. And and different people from different walks of life, professional, lay persons. And it's like, yeah, I've never really told, seriously, Christians. Yeah. Yeah. Because we get depressed too. You know what I mean? I mean, Elijah in the Bible got depressed. Yes. Jonah was depressed. I mean, he jumped in the whale's belly because he didn't want to do what God called him to. I mean, look, life is just filled with all kinds of stuff. So I'm here to tell you, if you're feeling judged, let it go. Check it. Like I always tell my clients, check that baggage. You can't take that on the plane and you know, and next to your seat. You gotta check that. There's a place for everything. And we're gonna check judgment at the door tonight, right? Let's just, yeah. I had a client say to me, yeah, I'm gonna throw it out. Let's throw it out the door. I like that idea. Let's check it. All right. Well, you know what? Let's just continue to worship. And I want to jump in. I don't know. I was like, I'm not gonna go talk that long tonight. Well, we're gonna see what God does with this podcast this evening. I'm so happy to be here. And when I get back from this song, I'm just gonna make a confession too. About what I was feeling this week about the podcast. And, I was so convicted in my prayer and meditation time. So we're going to play, I'm not sure. Let's go to because, I have a podcast playlist for Faith for the Journey. And I'm going to go there now and we're going to pick a song. Let's see what we're going to choose. I don't know. What should I play? I don't know. Gotta believe. How about that? You just gotta believe. This is by Tasha Cobbs Leonard. All right, guys. So I love that song too. That's by Tasha Cobbs Leonard. Yeah, you just gotta believe, and that's easier said than done. That really is. There's so many. I don't know. How can I say wisdoms? Some sayings. In the world. Yeah, I think that's the way I want to coin it. Some wisdoms of the world or world wisdom, something like that. Stuff like, well, you just got to believe. I mean, I even say that too. And sometimes I say that to myself and it's hard because of maybe the current circumstances that I'm facing. Maybe you feel the same way, So how do we respond to things that happen to us when life hurts? How do we respond to, I don't know, failure, loss, illness, death? I had an aunt that was buried last week Thursday, last week Wednesday, the day before my birthday. My birthday was Thursday, guys. Thank you for all the birthday wishes, by the way. Really appreciate it. Some people actually remembered. I was shocked. Just like last year. I don't know. I'm really thankful for my birthday. I'm 40. I've been telling people I'm 40 a lot. I'm 40 a lot. I like it. I'm going to start going around and say I'm 40 a lot. Thank you for my birthday wishes. I really do appreciate persons that I remembered. And if you forgot, that's okay. Life is busy. I had a few people that did forget and I was shocked too. I was like, what? I remembered your birthday last year. What's up? I'm not going to call names. But yeah, so how do we handle, death, tragedies, failure? Okay, so we can categorize all of that and say calamities. How about injustice? Injustices, right? I've had a couple encounters with injustice. I have. I'm not even going to open that box, but I'm sure you can. How about betrayal? That gets in there. Shock. I've worked with persons where, man, my wife cheated on me or my husband did this or that, stuff like that. Stuff, it's just trauma. How about trauma? Lots of trauma. I mean, there's enough to go around for all of us. How about abuse? Physical abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, and of course, grief. That's tough, right? I'm experiencing grief right now, and again, the loss of a job, life's most hurtful wounds. And, people will say stuff like, so here's some of the world wisdoms that go around. Just move on, just get over it. Trust in God. He'll work it out. Offer it up to God and everything's going to be okay. Just pray about it, Don't ever bother talking about it. Just pray about it and I will fix everything. or, learn and grow from it. Everything happens for a reason. How about that one? Now, I'm telling you, I'm careful not to say these things that I'm mentioning right now. Have I done this in the past? Yes. I think we're all guilty of that. And I'm going to tell you, I've been practicing. August coming will be 18 years. And the more mature I get in this work, you learn that there are certain things you don't do. And this is one of them. Tell people to let it go. Time heals all wounds, stuff like that. Those things, for some people, that formula works. It works. But for most of us, I just know that doesn't work. You know what I mean? So, when life hurts, what do you do? What do you do? And these things I mentioned, right? Some of these things you can easily put, it's for some of these things, they're very manageable. And, it's easy, kind of like you can just put it behind you. But for some of them, like death, that's not something you put behind you. That's something you live with for the rest of your life. Failure, you can, some people live with that for the rest of their life. So depending on what the failure is. So where am I going with this? Well, number one, let me just kind of reinforce that life hurts, right? Life hurts. And obviously, our hurts will be different. Some people have, some deep things, not to say they're not all deep, but some are very much deeper. All right. What do I mean by that? Well, all right. So maybe someone suffered, bankruptcy, right? Or maybe an eviction or loss of a job compared to maybe losing a child. So you can see that you put those in the scales, one's going to be heavier than the other. You know what I mean? You don't just put the death of a child behind you, or the death of a loved one, you just don't, it's not like that, and again, everyone experiences different types of loss, and everyone feels them differently depending on the nature of the loss. So where am I going with this again? Life hurts. So what do you do? And when these things happen, some of us feel like, well, how did God let that happen? This is where I want to go. How did God let that happen? Where is He? So remember last week, I went to in the book of John, we looked at this man who he was born blind, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because they were also trying to point a finger at Jesus and say, yeah, you know what? How is it that, they wanted Jesus Christ to condemn these people because, his parents sinned, somebody sinned. And why are you dealing with them? Because they're sinners, they're nobody. Why are you being bothered with them? And Jesus Christ responded and say, hey, you know what? Neither his parents nor he did anything, but this was done so, God will get the glory. Now, I'm going to tell you, that's hard. It's hard because it's hard to accept that, some people are born with these kind of limitations or disabilities, and the scripture says that, this is the reason. Now, depending on your orientation to life, I'm not sure if you're a creationist or you're evolutionist. Well, I'm coming from a creationist perspective, and that's kind of somewhat palatable for me to swallow. But I have to say, my humanity, that is hard. Where am I going with this? Is to say that with those of us who search for meaning in life, and not necessarily answers, but meaning and understanding. I think I pointed out the difference last week about a meaning and an answer. Did you get a chance to look at that? You should. But it goes to show then that, there was a purpose behind that situation. And if you read the rest of that scripture, you can see the purpose that was unfolding in the life of that young man, and the purpose that was unfolding universally in the lives of the Pharisees and other people that were impacted, because ultimately he was healed. He was used, right? He was a vehicle. He was a channel to display, the love of God, the power of God in his life and for others to see. So from that story, we can see that, hey, there are sometimes that in some circumstances, it's nothing that you did wrong or that your parents did wrong. Ultimately, it just goes to show that in life, existentially, we don't have control over the things that happen. That's one of the things I want to kind of underscore. But not only that, but to say that, you know, when Jesus Christ came around, he believed. He believed. This is the thing. How did he believe? He spat on his hand and touched his eye and told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. And I don't know how he got there. That's the thing. I said that last week, and I don't know how he got there. I don't know how he got there, but he believed. He had to have believed to go to do it. Would you have believed? Would I have believed? I don't know. So life hurts. And, I had listed some things earlier. I'd mentioned some different types of hurts, and maybe some are saying, well, why was I born to this? Maybe, I don't know, maybe to God get the glory, maybe to touch your heart so that you can, maybe drawn to him, through your hardship. Now, I know that's hard, but I'm going to give you, I would say, a scientific view of what I just explained from the scriptures. We're going to talk about existentialism, when I take a break here. So we're going to take a break because I want you to let that digest for a second, right? So I mentioned some different things that happen to us in life, and then I gave the scripture in the Bible to support some of the hurts that I'm talking about, and a framework to work with to say, how is that this happened? Why? When I come back from the break, right, we're going to take a look at the existential framework that supports what I just said. Because guess what? Not everyone listening to this podcast is from a creationist perspective and will accept that, especially when you're facing or have faced some traumas or some injustice or some calamities. I mean, not all of you do. So when I come back from the break, I'm going to talk from an existential perspective. It's a scientific framework that supports what I just said, right? Why are we doing that? Because we need to evolve spiritually, right? We need to be flexible. Yeah, this is a good time to say this. We need to be flexible, about the resources that we use to cope. We need to be flexible. We need to be flexible about the resources in other words, we need to be open. That's what that means. We need to be open, flexible, open to resources that can help us. Wisdom is one of them through quotes, through different frameworks like I'm introducing, right? Spirituality, as I've been really honing in and hounding and pounding since episode 1. Research is clear, very clear, more and more that, religion or religiosity or the inclusion of spirituality, right, is a resource to help to meet, right, the challenges in our lives. So you can finish your story. Man, there's so much to talk about, but I'm going to pause here. And again, when I come back, I'm going to, introduce or reintroduce or keep reinforcing, I should say, keep just underlining, marking existentialism and how if you're not a believer, I'm not going to persuade you or, challenge you, maybe persuade you a little bit, but not challenge you, but show you another perspective to say, you know what? Life is gonna be what it is, but what are you gonna do? How are you gonna relate? How are you gonna relate to the things that happen to us? How am I going to relate to the things that happen to me? Right? And so that's really important. There's so much to talk about. Man, all right. So here we go. I almost want to do a part 3 to this, but we'll see how it goes. I love this song. Praise is What I Do. It's a reprise by Shekinah Glory Ministry. You know what? Nah, I'll do that one next. We're going to do Anthony Brown. I'm back. Hey, quick light moment. How is a time change treating you? I have to admit, I usually whine about it, kick and scream. But this year, for some reason, I was a little bit more disciplined and prepared. You know what I did? Yeah. So last Sunday, what I did, I took a nap in the afternoon. So yeah. So in other words, rather than, rushing to go to bed and get up tired, nope, I took a nap in the afternoon. So I was refreshed after church. After church, I took a nap. And then, I cooked and everything. And then, I was busy doing different things. And when the evening came, I was like, okay, I'm feeling a little tired. And I have to admit, so we lost an hour. So instead of me going, because I typically go to bed like around 9:30. So I ended up going to bed like around 10:30. which is that's the new time. And it worked out. I got up Monday morning and I felt refreshed. I even still made it to the gym. If you've been watching my start campaign is going into, we just finished week 7 and now we're going into week 8, so it's campaign start, instead of hoping, just start. And if you have been watching it, it's just a way of motivating myself, for keeping myself motivated and letting others know that, and by the way, I'm not always perfect. I mean, I'm pretty disciplined though. And I usually share, if I'm having a rough day and if I got up late, or if I did, whatever is happening in the moment, I share it on the social media page. And I hope it's been an encouragement to you all. It's been definitely encouragement to me. It's funny when you have accountability, it kind of motivates you, because I know, like, okay, I'm keeping up with this. I'm sharing it with everyone. And it just keeps me going. There's a scripture in the Bible that says iron sharpeneth iron. So I don't know if you've been watching Campaign Start. I appreciate it. Let me know what you're doing that you've started and you continue. Maybe you've had some difficulties or obstacles. I expect that you will, because what? We'll live in an existential world where existential things will happen, right? All right, so let's jump right back in. So yeah, I was feeling kind of down last week on the podcast because I had gotten on and I was excited about it. And actually, I think no one joined the podcast last week. I was like, Lord, did you call me to do this podcast? And yeah, I did. I did say that. Can you believe it? It's funny how we get caught up on, our ego. And that goes for me too. And one of existentialism has 4 themes. It has 4 themes. And one of them is the first theme is that 2 things I want to point out as I shared my story about how I was feeling, how, what you're designed to do, or you realize you're walking in your purpose. And things just, like when things didn't go the way, there's, looking for linearity, we start to doubt, or we start, to hear those old voices, those old tapes come back like, oh, who told you to do that? That's a waste of your time. Nobody really cares. That stuff. Yeah, that stuff was really trying to get loud in my mind. And then, so when those things happen, right, what can you do? What can you do? What is the currency? The currency is faith, right? So I turned to my faith. I literally did. And I prayed. I'm like, Lord, I'm feeling like this about the podcast. That was last week, Saturday night. And I went to bed and I prayed and I said, Lord, you know what? I need you to approve me. I need you to really let me know that you're with me on this podcast, right? I promise you. I went to church Sunday, and the overseer, bishop for the church, because I go to Dublin Church of God, and he preached. His title was "Follow Me." Just follow me. I was like, oh, what? Right? He said, follow me. And he preached. All right. He preached. And at the end of the service, he said, you go out there and make disciples. God has called you. There are a lot of hurting people in the world. He says, because, in the book of John, he was preaching when he was, I forgot the scripture now and I'm not looking at it, but, when he was walking by the seaside and he saw, the son of Zebedee, they're all mending their nets. And he says, follow me. And they dropped their nets. That's their profession, right? And they put down what they were doing to follow Jesus Christ. And I said, wow, how powerful that is, that whatever it is that I'm doing, I just need to stay focused on him. So I'm doing this podcast because I know that he called me to this podcast from last year. And, and so anyway, so that continued. But before even I went to church on Sunday, I told you, I prayed about how I felt sad. And, it's so funny. I said, Lord, I just, I was reading in the book of Acts, I think it was book of Acts. And I stumbled upon this scripture and I want to share it with you. I was like, Lord, you're that quick. That's quick. That's quick. And this is the scripture, and I'm going to find it real quick. It goes something like this. It's not wise to commend yourself, right? Amongst yourself. Yes. And it's not wise. Okay, here we go. So I want to read it word for word. Yes, 2 Corinthians 10, verse 12. Yes, I want to read that to you. This is what came after I started praying. It says, for we dare not number ourselves or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves, right? For in measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, that's a lot of selves, are not wise. Listen to Shadow. So Paul had written a letter to the church members about some issues, and they rebutted him and said, hey, you talk big and bad in these letters, but basically, you're not even like us. You're not as bad as us. And Paul was like, look, I'm not comparing myself to you, and I'm not comparing ourselves among ourselves. And then he went on to further say, who we boast in is our God. Paul said, I boast in God. I don't boast in myself or anything that I do. And right then and there, I was like, okay, that's a reminder that it's not about the external. It's not about the external. It's not about even your own personal qualities, right? It's about who gave you those qualities. It's about, who gave you your intellect and any outcomes from your intellect, anything. Paul said, you know what? I don't have to compare myself. I don't have to approve myself. And here's a scripture that really got me. Here we go. He says, it's God who approves. I'm going to find that one. 2 Corinthians 10. I'm going to find it because I want to read the rest of it. If I can find it really quickly here. I should have had it ready. 2 Corinthians chapter 10. And here we go. I found it. All right. And he says here, for we dare not make ourselves of the number. Wow. Or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. But they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves amongst themselves are not wise. But we will not boast of things without our measure. That means outside of our measure, like ourselves. But according to the measure of the rule which God hath distributed to us, like whatever God has given us, a measure to reach even unto you. And so I love that. He says, and then drop down to verse 18 of 2 Corinthians chapter 10. He says, 17 and 18 reads, but he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. For not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. That's what I read the night before. And then I went to church the next day, and the preacher literally preached about that and says, follow me. So I'm following God. I am. And so when existential things come, like those thoughts, those negative external environmental things, those things that come upon us, this is why it's so important to be able to read the word, to have a source, to have a resource. Be flexible in your resource. One of my primary resources is my Bible and prayer. And research is clear about being flexible in your resources to help you, all right, to help you through difficult things. Some of the items that I mentioned earlier. So that story, right, about the blind person and, the purpose that happened with him, right, and how that God allowed that. So here's the other part of that we're not going to like. So when I'm in therapy and I'm working with persons and I'm about to say something really hard, I say, guess what? You're not going to like it. Now, if you listen to this podcast and you work with me, I tell this like this. You're not going to like what I have to say. But here we go. You ready? All right. So now, from a creationist perspective, and it just dawned on me to mention Darwinism. So Darwinism is about evolution, right? It's about adaptation. But even with adaptation simply means it's adapting to the environment. So something's happening to the environment to cause adaptation. So this is why people who say, well, they're evolutionists, hey, I don't argue with you. You're right. Something's happening in the environment. And from a creationist perspective, we believe that, Adam and Eve, they were disobedient. And so guess what? They caused creation, the entire creation, right? Nature, the design of nature, humanity, the design of humanity to change and to what? To now fall into existentialism, where things that happen that we cannot control. So when you ask questions like, why does this happen? Why does this happen to me? Why? So we're all born into a fallen world. You've heard that expression. It's true. Adaptation. Yeah, something is happening. All right. And so, when we talk about this other scripture, I told you that you're not going to like, because that's my base, right? So the contrast, then, it's the word I want to use, the contrast from the man born with blindness and he didn't do nothing. So, at least if you're looking for any answer, we can say, well, he didn't do nothing, right? You have something you can point to. Man, like the negative dominant theme in my life is abandonment and rejection. That's for me. That's the fallenness that I fell into when I came into this world. A lot of abandonment, and emotional abandonment and rejection. Seriously. And for some of you, it's the same. For some of you, it's physical abuse, sexual abuse. I mean, all kinds of things. Violence. I talked about that. Death. I mentioned that. All right. So so it's hard, So a lot of us, all of us are born, some people are born into parents in the homes that, they're alcoholism. I work with persons from that background too, like serious anxiety and depression, a very poor self-esteem, very poor sense of self, very codependent behaviors, right? So, I mean, when life hurts, there are different things that happen to each of us, so we come out looking different, feeling different, having a view of ourselves that's different. So here's the scripture that supports that. So I'm going to give it the scripture, and then I'm going to give it some a scientific framework, okay, that supports the scripture. And again, be flexible. Be flexible in your resource that can help you to cultivate faith and belief in your life so you can grow. So remember, be flexible. So here's the scripture, right? Oh my gosh, my phone is like giving me a hard time. It's Romans chapter 8, verse 20. That's a hard scripture for me. It is. And I just want to say it with love, right? And honesty. It says, for the creation was subject to frustration, not by its own choice, but the will of the one who subjected it in hope. Wow. I felt that. I really felt that. It says, for the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected in hope. Now, here's some cross-reference for that. Psalms 39, verse 5 says, you indeed have made my days as a hand's breadth. That means our lives are not long. I mean, the Bible talks about, I think, 3 scores or 4 scores and 10, right? That's the average lifespan for an individual. But it says, Psalms 39, verse 5 says, you indeed have made my days as hand's breadth. And my lifetime as nothing before you. Truly, each man at his best exists as but a breath. Isn't that the truth? How about this one? Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2. And if you want the scriptures, you can always, find me and I can send them to you. Futility or futility, says the teacher. Futility of futilities. Everything is futile. And that's powerful because so everything that we go through, we were all subjected to one of those things. We are all subjected to the things I mentioned earlier: failure, grief, injustice, all these frustrations. And of course, I would use a different word. I mean, calamities then, maybe hardships. And existentialism is exactly that. It's a framework that captures these things. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but you have some brilliant people that have studied existentialism. And it has 4 themes that I love. And I teach on this a lot when I'm working to help, especially to help those who do not have faith, do not have a belief. And without their permission, I can't talk about, faith in God. I can't. That's unethical. All right. And, I'm very much, ethics oriented and boundary oriented. Right. So the four themes that comes out of existentialism, right, is the highlighting the fact that there's a fundamental value of the uniqueness of a person. So that's why each of us experience our losses, our griefs, and everything so differently, right? So we have a uniqueness to us. Everyone is not designed the same. I think you know that. So the second theme in existentialism says it's the recognition of that suffering is a necessary part of life. Can you believe that? That is research. That's research. I'm quoting you. You can go look it up. Existentialism. Okay. And so it says the recognition of suffering as a necessary part of life. It's an ongoing process, right? It actually uses the word process. So we are being processed through the frustrations that we were made subject to. Can you believe that? Man, I'm speaking that stuff and it's hitting me. It's hitting me differently right now. And thirdly, that, So we need that to actually find the uniqueness in ourselves so we can grow, so we can evolve. Remember I talked about evolving earlier, right? And so we can grow and so we can find meaning. Remember I talked about difference between meaning and answer? All right. And so there's an emphasis, right? There's an emphasis in being involved in the moment when things are happening, not checking out. Because if we check out when things are happening to us, which we all do from time to time, then we're not learning. And so guess what? We get some of those same lessons again and again and again. So what is the and so by the way, you get to discover your own uniqueness and your real identity. Not the one that the world put upon you, the frustration, but the one that's hidden because of the frustration, the identity that's hidden because of the abuse, the one that's hidden because of the abandonment and the rejection. We operate from that person, from that identity, and the processing comes so we can actually find the real us. I want you to know this. I do this every day in my work, right? I do it every day. All right. So being present in what's going on, being able to contemplate what's going on, to be curious. You often hear me talk about being curious rather than judging and labeling what happens to us. Like rather than closing the door on what happens to us, right? So we can become egoless. I might talk about that next time, talking about egolessness and the fact that there's impermanence. I think I'm going to talk about that because we're almost out of time. But egoless simply means that we become detached from external things. Like I need to become detached from who joins this podcast. And God, I need to become detached from, doubting and not believing. Like, God really called me to do this, right? When we become egoless, well, guess what? We care less about what other persons say. We care less about the external things, these things that we can hold on to, and the temporary feeling, right? When we become egoless, right, we become less attached, to things that's going on in this world, and we become more inclined to paying attention to what's happening inside of us and connecting spiritually. And if we can do that, that's going to build our faith significantly. And so we can what? So when these things come, because they are going to come, I think I'll continue with, episode 8 talking about impermanence and change that will always come. I think that's very fitting for where we are, where we're ending tonight as we look at when life hurts. So let's wind down with, let's just recap. So we continue to talk about, we continue to put framework around, when life hurts. And, tonight I listed different things that come upon all of us, that can cause us to, want to throw in a towel, that cause us to want to give up, that really causes us to have unbelief in our lives, that causes us to feel like, we're like done for and we're unworthy. And the truth about that is there is no truth about that. Those are all lies. And then I picked up on looking at the story in the book of John, giving, meaning behind some of the things that happen to us that, yes, sometimes you'll find an answer, but more times than not, you won't find an answer because, and then I gave scripture, looking at what happened to, society or the world or our existence and what we're all subjected to. And then I also gave framework. I gave scientific framework, to give support to what I presented from a creationist perspective, because what I'm aware that not all persons are going to believe that. Oh, that's just a bunch of hogwash. So I gave the scientific perspective on that, right? To say, hey, this is still a resource that you can, maybe consider using, right? Or give opening to what? To consider your predicament, right? To see what you can do. Because you really do have options about what you do with your life, despite the things that come. So, yeah. And then we're going to just end here tonight. And so regarding your faith, are you going to be flexible? Right? Are you going to be flexible? And remember, the exception really happens if we pay attention to, that positive thing that happened. Because there's so many negative themes in our lives, right? There's so many. But, if you heard me maybe 15 minutes ago, I talked about my exception when I felt bad last week and I prayed. That's the thing. When you feel bad, what do you do? Do you run and pray? Do you run, what do? do you go take a walk and, meditate or breathe, do breath work? Those are resources, right? Those are mindfulness practices, right? So what do you do? Or do you go drink? Do you go smoke? What do you do, right? Do you numb? Remember, numbing is only temporary. That pain is there. That unbelief is there, but you can really address it in a healthy way. And I'm hoping that Faith of the Journey, you'll consider listening to some of the things that I talked about. Hey, replay the podcast, listen to it with someone and ask questions and become curious. I'm here. We're going to pick up on the themes of existentialism next time. We're going to examine them, a little bit more closely to see maybe, what other resources can come from that to address or to cultivate faith. Man, you've been awesome tonight. Let me give you another round of applause. I am so thankful to the Lord for giving me strength, courage, to do this. And I really trust that. I'm trusting. And I'm believing that this podcast is reaching persons that need to hear this, and that my faith will continue to grow. Yeah. So we're going to rock out. What shall we rock out to? I don't know. It's 2 minutes till 7. Let's see. I think I'm going to pray. Wow, that's pretty deep. I'm going to pray. Yeah, I'll do that. I'm going to play Free Indeed, William Murphy, because we are free. We are free. When we become egoless, we become free instead of being in fear.